There's a small farm in a village in the center of Ohio that's a sacred place to me. And it's remarkable for many reasons. One, it was part of the Underground Railroad, and it actually has real millstones that were used to grind grain when that was modern technology. It's also where my mother grew up, although not at the same time, and hopefully my mom's not mad at me for making that joke. But it's remarkable to me because it's on this farm that I spent time with my granddad. You see, my father's father is my grandpa, but my mother's father is my granddad. And that's how it's always been. And I was always close to both of them, but this farm was my granddad's, and my granddad was a giant of a man. And to put this in perspective, I'm the shortest of the guys in my family, at 6 foot tall. All my cousins are taller than I am by almost half a foot. Guess where they got their height from? Despite his stature, though, he was an enormously compassionate and gentle man. He was one of the first people that taught me that there's an enormous strength in love and being compassionate for other people. And for that, I am forever grateful to him. On this farm, though, there was coal. And coal by itself is dirty and pretty unremarkable looking. Without doing anything to it, it kind of looks like a dark rock for those of you that have never seen it before when it's dug straight out of the ground. My granddad put a bunch of this in a tin can and carefully lit it on fire with a torch. My eyes as a child lit up in wonder and amazement as these rocks sparked to life and burned. And I credit my granddad with two things here. One is my childhood fascination with fire. Oops. Oh well. But the other is really enjoying being in nature and being fascinated by it. Because also on the same farm is a grove of pine trees. And I think I spent more time in those pine trees than I spent in the house. I learned to love the trees, the creek, the dirt, the fires on that farm with him. And it wasn't the objects themselves, though. It's what they meant to me. It was the relationship to me. And being on that farm, being with Granddad, being in nature surrounded me in a peace that I felt as a child. And I know God watches over me just as Granddad did when I was on that farm. And in our gospel reading in Luke chapter 1, John the Baptist's father is prophesying, saying what John the Baptist will do in relation to Jesus and what God will do through Jesus. And it's incredibly hopeful message, and it's an exciting message, depending on how you listen to it. Because John the Baptist is still a kid at this point. And I know when I was a kid, if someone would have told me that I had the responsibility of making the way before the Lord, I don't think being excited and hopeful would have been the two emotions that I would have felt if somebody would have told me that. But the scripture says that John grew and became strong in spirit and lived in the wilderness until he appeared publicly to Israel. It says that in verse 80. So we have this message of hope, this message of excitement, this message that reassures us that God will not forget us in our times of need. God's faithful to the promise of our ancestors, and that we'll be rescued no matter what happens. But, there's always a but when we read Scripture, because we have to respond to it. What do we say back to that? What do we say back to that today, if we're being honest right now? For me, it's that I want to feel that same peace that I felt back on Granddad's farm. Out in the trees, watching in amazement as the coal embers danced. I want to feel that everything's going to be okay right now, even though when I look at the news, when I look at the world, there's times that I know that it's really not. And as much as I want to, it's not within my own power to make it okay, no matter how hard I try. We have people hurting everywhere for every conceivable reason. Some of them I know, some of them I love, and I just want it to be okay. I want to be back in that grove of trees again. I want to shut out the world at times, maybe just take a nap, the pine needles and the shade. But I can't do that because it probably wouldn't help. One, because Ohio's a long ways away. And I don't think my heart would let me find that same rest again, knowing what I know about the world and my role in it. Part of living as Christians is holding the tension and reality that we know what's going on in the world, but also with the promise of hope for what we know it can be tomorrow and the promise that God gives us. A future will eventually come about where we don't have the suffering. We will have a peace that we hope for and a peace that everyone experiences. But at the same time, we don't wait for this future idly. Like John, we're called to make a way for the Lord. And like John, we're called to serve God directly, uniquely. Sure, we may not be eating locusts and directly baptizing people, but our service to God is no less important than that. So maybe we're not that far off from John after all. Blessed be the Lord God of Israel, for he has looked favorably upon his people and redeemed them. He has raised up a mighty Savior for us in the house of his servant David, as he spoke through the mouth of his holy prophets from old, that we would be saved from our enemies and from the hands of all who hate us. Thus he has shown the mercy promised to our ancestors, and has remembered his holy covenant, the oath that he swore to our ancestor Abraham, to grant us that we, being rescued from the hands of our enemies, might serve him without fear in holiness and righteousness before him all of our days. And you, child, will be called the prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare his ways, to give knowledge of salvation to his people by the forgiveness of their sins, by the tender mercy of our God. The dawn from on high will break upon us, to give light to those who sit in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the way of peace. May each of you do so with God's help. Amen.